The Roman Empire had never lost. Not really. They had suffered setbacks, ambushes in German forests, disasters in Persian deserts, moments where the line bent and threatened to break. But Rome always came back, always rebuilt, always returned stronger, more ruthless, more organized than before. In 100 AD, Rome controlled more of the known world than any civilization in human history. 5 million square kilometers, 70 million people, an army so disciplined, so professional, so devastatingly effective that entire nations surrendered without fighting simply because they had heard what happened to nations that didn't. Rome did not lose, but somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was coming that had never heard of Rome, something that had already destroyed civilizations far older, far larger, and far more powerful. It had a list, and Earth was on it. To understand what Thanos actually is, you need to forget the movies for a moment. Not the purple alien, not the villain with the glove. Think about what he actually represents. Thanos of Titan believes, genuinely, completely, without doubt, that the universe is dying. That finite resources and infinite population growth is a mathematical equation with only one solution. That mercy, in the long run, is cruelty. That the most loving thing any being can do for the universe is remove half of everything that consumes it. He has watched civilizations collapse under their own weight. He has seen planets strip themselves bare. He has calculated the math 10,000 times on 100 different worlds. The first Romans to find him are tax collectors. 3 men on horseback, returning late from a collection run in the countryside. They see a massive figure standing in the field and assume, reasonably, that it's a runaway slave or a drunk Germanic mercenary. The lead collector calls out in Latin, identifies himself as an agent of the imperial treasury, orders the figure to identify itself and state its business on imperial land. Thanos turns around. The collectors see, in the torchlight, something that their brains genuinely cannot categorize. 8 feet tall, purple skin, a jaw like carved stone, eyes that look like they've seen the birth and death of stars, and found both equally unremarkable. The lead collector, a man named Marcus, who had been doing this job for 15 years and had never been frightened of anything, feels something he has never felt before in his professional life. He feels small. Not physically small, existentially small, like standing at the edge of the ocean and suddenly understanding, for the first time, what the ocean actually is. He asks, in a much quieter voice, "What are you?" Thanos looks at him for a moment. Then he answers, in perfect Latin, because the space stone allows him to understand and speak any language instantaneously. "I'm inevitable." Marcus turns his horse around and rides for Rome at full gallop. And the math always gives him the same answer. Half. Now drop that ideology into the most powerful empire on Earth in 100 AD. Because here is what makes this collision genuinely fascinating. Rome believed almost exactly the same thing. Not in those words. Not with infinity stones. But Roman imperial philosophy was built on a simple foundation. The strong survive, the weak serve, and the universe is ordered by power. Rome didn't apologize for conquest. They celebrated it. They built monuments to it. They called it civilization. 2 forces, both convinced they were saving the world, about to meet on a road outside the greatest city on Earth. Thanos arrives on Earth without the Infinity Gauntlet fully assembled. He has 3 stones. The Power Stone, the Space Stone, the Reality Stone, enough to be functionally unstoppable by any force on Earth in 100 AD. He arrives at night, in a field outside Rome. No army, no jeeps, no announcement. Just him, standing in a wheat field in the darkness, looking at the lights of the city on the horizon. From a distance, Rome at night is genuinely beautiful. Torches on every major road. The Colosseum lit from within. Temple fires burning on the Palatine and Capitoline hills. The sound of 2 million people living their lives carrying on the warm Italian night air. Thanos stands there for a long time, not because he is impressed, because he is calculating. The report reaches the Praetorian Guard within the hour. The Guard, Rome's elite imperial bodyguard, 10,000 of the finest soldiers in the Empire, does not panic. They have protocols for everything. Suspicious individuals near the city, potential assassins, foreign agents, supernatural omens. They deploy a sentry, 80 men, full armor, torches, 2 senior officers. They find Thanos still standing in the field. He hasn't moved. The senior officer, a veteran of 3 campaigns in Dacia, a man with 17 years of military service and a chest full of medals, forms his men into a standard engagement line and approaches. He stops 10 meters away, looks up at Thanos, looks up considerably. He has faced Germanic giants before. Men 6.5 feet tall, wild-eyed, screaming, covered in blue paint. He has never been intimidated. He is, currently, intimidated. But he is also a Roman officer, and Roman officers do not show fear. You are trespassing on imperial land, he says. Identify yourself and submit to custody, or we will use force. Thanos looks at the line of soldiers, at their shields, their pylon spears, their disciplined formation. Something crosses his face that might, on another being, be called respect. Your world has warriors, he says. Good. The strong should face what comes for them. The officer orders the attack. What happens next takes approximately 45 seconds. The front rank hurls their pylon simultaneously, 16 heavy javelins traveling at lethal velocity, enough collective force to stop a charging horse. Thanos catches one with his bare hand, looks at it briefly, sets it down. The others hit him, bounce off. One actually bends on impact with his jaw, exactly as it was designed to do against a shield, because the metallurgy of the pylon was engineered to deform on contact, and apparently Thanos' face has more structural integrity than a Roman shield. The sentry charges. Thanos raises his left hand, the hand with the Power Stone, and releases a fraction of its energy. A fraction. The shockwave doesn't kill anyone. He isn't trying to kill anyone. Not yet. It simply picks up 80 armored soldiers and deposits them, gently, in various parts of the wheat field, like someone brushing crumbs off a table. 80 men in full armor, deposited in a wheat field, without a scratch on any of them. Thanos is making a point. I could have killed all of you. I didn't. Think carefully about what that means. Emperor Trajan receives the report at dawn. He reads it 3 times. Not because he doesn't understand it, because he is trying to find the part that makes strategic sense. An entity, 8 feet tall, purple, deflected 80 soldiers without apparent effort. Did not pursue, did not attack the city, is currently sitting on a hillside outside Rome, apparently waiting. Trajan is not a man who frightens easily. He has led armies personally. He has been in the front line of battles. He has made decisions that cost thousands of lives and lived with them without flinching. But he is also the greatest strategic mind Rome has produced in a generation. And his strategic mind is telling him something very clearly right now. This is not a military problem. Not yet. He calls for his council, his generals, his advisors, the Pontifex Maximus, 3 senators whose judgment he actually trusts. He tells them exactly what the reports say. The room is silent for a long moment. Then his best general, a man named Lucius who had never in his career suggested anything other than overwhelming force, says something that surprises everyone. What does it want? Trajan nods slowly. That, he says, is exactly the right question. Trajan sends an envoy, not a soldier, a diplomat, his best one, a Greek-educated Roman named Publius, who spoke 7 languages and had negotiated treaties with Parthian kings and Germanic tribal chiefs. Publius walks out to the hillside alone, unarmed, carrying only a scroll and a wax tablet. He finds Thanos sitting on a rock, looking at the sunrise over Rome. Publius, to his enormous credit, does not run. He sits down on a nearby rock, unrolls his scroll, picks up his stylus, and says, "I am here to understand your purpose. Please begin." Thanos looks at him for a moment. Then he begins. He explains the philosophy of the infinity gauntlet, the mathematics of resource consumption, the projections he has run on civilizations across the galaxy, the pattern he has watched repeat itself 100 times: growth, consumption, collapse. the suffering of the final generation who inherit a stripped world. He explains the snap, what it is, what it does, why half is not cruelty. It is, by his calculation, the most merciful possible intervention. Publius writes everything down. Then he looks up and says, "You have come to do this to Rome?" "I have come to do this to Earth," Thanos says. Rome is simply the largest concentration of humanity on this world. It seemed the appropriate place to begin. Publius writes that down too. Then he asks the question that will define the next 3 days. And if we refuse? Thanos looks at him with something that is genuinely not malice. It is sadder than malice. It is the expression of a being who has had this conversation before, on other worlds, with other representatives of other civilizations, and already knows how it ends. Refusal, he says quietly, is not a variable I have encountered that changes the outcome. Publius returns to Rome and delivers his report to Trajan word for word. The council erupts. The generals want immediate deployment. Full military response. Every legion within marching distance. Call them in. Artillery. Cavalry. Everything Rome has. Overwhelm it with numbers and iron and Roman will. The Pontifex Maximus wants a ritual. Sacrifices to every god. Jupiter. Mars. Pluto. Every temple in Rome active simultaneously. If this is a supernatural entity, and clearly it is, then the response must be supernatural. 3 senators want to negotiate. Offer tribute. Gold. Land. Whatever it takes to make it leave. Trajan listens to all of them. Then he asks a question that silences the room. "Did anyone notice," he says slowly, "that it could have destroyed 80 of our best soldiers and chose not to?" Silence. "It sat on a hillside and waited for us to send a diplomat," Trajan continues. "It spoke to our envoy for 2 hours. It explained its reasoning." He looks around the room. Whatever this thing is, it wants to be understood. It wants us to see its logic. Another silence, which means, Trajan says, it is not simply a destroyer. It believes it is right, and something that believes it is right can be argued with. He stands. "Deploy the legions, but do not attack. Not yet. First, I'm going to talk to it myself." Trajan meets Thanos on the hillside at midday. No armor. A simple white toga. Alone, except for Publius taking notes 20 meters behind him. He walks up to Thanos and looks up at him. A small, middle-aged Roman man looking up at a being that has destroyed civilizations, and says, in a completely level voice, "I'm Trajan, Emperor of Rome. I govern the largest empire on this world. If you're going to do something to this world, you should speak to me first." Thanos looks at him for a long moment. Then he sits down, so they're closer to eye level, and they talk. For 6 hours. What Trajan argues is not what Thanos expects. He doesn't beg, doesn't threaten, doesn't offer gold. He challenges the mathematics. "You say half," Trajan says. "But half of what? Half of Rome's population today means the infrastructure collapses. The aqueducts fail. The grain distribution breaks down. The survivors die within a generation from famine and disease. Your half becomes all." Thanos has heard versions of this argument before. He has answers, but Trajan keeps going. "You have watched civilizations die from overconsumption. I accept that. But Rome is not dying from overconsumption. Rome is dying slowly. Over centuries, I know this from the weight of its own complexity. The solution to complexity is not reduction. It is innovation." He gestures toward the city. "In the last 50 years, Roman engineers have built aqueducts that carry water to 2 million people. We have developed crop rotation techniques that have doubled agricultural output in 3 provinces. We are not a civilization consuming itself to death. We are a civilization learning, slowly, how to be more efficient." Thanos is quiet. "Give us time," Trajan says. "Not mercy. Time. And watch what we build." Thanos is silent for a very long time. Then he says something that Publius, 20 meters away, frantically writes down word for word because he senses it matters. "Every civilization I have visited has told me they were different, that they were the exception, that they would find another way. Were any of them right?" Trajan asks. A pause. "No," Thanos says. "Then you have already decided," Trajan says. "And this conversation is theater. Another long silence. Not theater, Thanos says finally. I genuinely wanted to know if your species had found an answer I hadn't considered. And Thanos stands, looks at Rome spread across its 7 hills in the afternoon light. You have not, he says, but you're closer than most. He raises the gauntlet. Trajan doesn't move, doesn't run, doesn't call for his guards, doesn't close his eyes. He looks directly at Thanos and says, very quietly, then at least let it be said that Rome faced this standing up. The snap, a sound like the universe folding in half. A flash of light that the historians who survive will describe for generations as looking like the sun had briefly touched the earth. And then silence. 1 million people, gone in an instant. Not violently, not painfully, simply gone, between one breath and the next. Dissolved into golden light that fades before anyone can fully process what they saw. Trajan spends the next decade rebuilding. Not just population, infrastructure. The loss of half the empire's workforce initially devastates the economy, the military, the agricultural system. Provinces that had been marginal become critical. Supply chains that had been redundant become essential. But Rome, the real Rome, the Rome of engineers and administrators and legal scholars and military strategists, rebuilds. They consolidate, pull back from the most extended frontiers, concentrate on the core, develop new agricultural techniques out of absolute necessity, redesign the military around smaller, more efficient units because they no longer have the numbers for the old model. The snap, in a dark and terrible way, forces Rome to become what it had been slowly failing to become on its own. Leaner, smarter, more efficient. Not because Thanos was right, but because Rome was Rome. And Thanos? He leaves Earth after the snap. But before he goes, and this is the detail that Publius writes down and that will be copied and recopied in Roman archives for centuries, he stops on the hillside one more time, and he looks back at the city. And what crosses his face, just for a moment, before he activates the space stone and disappears, is doubt. Not regret, not guilt. He is too committed to his philosophy for either of those. But doubt. Because Trajan had said something in those 6 hours of conversation that no other leader on any other world had said. Something that had gotten past the mathematics and the projections and the certainty. You have already decided. And this conversation is theater. Thanos had said no. But standing on that hillside, looking at a city that was already, in real time, beginning to reorganize and adapt and survive, he wonders, for the first time in a very long time, whether he was telling the truth. Here's what this story is actually about. Thanos is not a villain in his own mind. He is a mathematician who has confused calculation for wisdom, who has mistaken the ability to count death for the ability to understand life. Rome is not a hero in this story either. Rome was built on slavery and conquest and systematic cruelty on a scale that would make most modern people sick. But Rome had something Thanos didn't. The capacity to change. Not quickly, not gracefully, not without enormous suffering. But Rome, at its best, in its best moments, with its best leaders, could look at a problem and adapt. Could take catastrophe and rebuild. Could face something it had never faced before and find, somewhere in its brutal, pragmatic soul, a new way forward. Thanos had the power to reshape the universe. But he couldn't imagine a solution he hadn't already calculated. And that, more than the gauntlet, more than the stones, more than all the power in the universe, is the most dangerous limitation any being can have. Here's what I want you to think about. Thanos spared Trajan. In this story, whether that was intentional or random chance, the man who argued most clearly against him survived to rebuild what he had taken. Was that mercy? Was it irony? Was it, in some twisted way, exactly what Thanos intended? To leave the strongest to prove or disprove his theory? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happens when Thanos arrives at Thermopylae, facing 300 Spartans who have already decided they're going to die and genuinely don't care how powerful he is, that video is coming next.